focus, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book Uncluttered, no other than Miss Angie Hyche.
Hi, how are you, Daniel?
Fabulous, fabulous like you, Miss Angie. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a professional organizer, author, speaker, and podcaster. I've done a lot of different jobs over the course of my 60 years, including teaching and medicine and raising kids. But for the last 8 years, I've been focused on helping people find and eliminate clutter in their lives and bring some order to their lives. And that's my passion.
Certainly. Miss Angie Heights, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. So, what does being uncluttered mean in the context of this book?
Most of the time when people think about clutter, they imagine piles of stuff in their home. And clutter can definitely be piles of stuff, but I look at clutter a lot more broadly than that. I see clutter as anything that distracts you from your priorities. So that can be piles of stuff. It can also be a calendar that is just so crowded with events, or your to-do list so crowded with things to do, or your mind crowded with things so that you can't really focus on what's most important in your life. So a life that is uncluttered is a life that has the unnecessary things eliminated so that you can really prioritize the most important things in your life.
Certainly. So, Miss Angie, what are the key themes explored in this book?
So in this book, which I co authored with my friend and fellow former professional organizer, Leanna George, we talk about clutter of all kinds. We've kind of divided it into three categories: physical clutter of stuff, schedule clutter in our calendars and to do lists, and then attention clutter or mental clutter in our minds. And this is a book that is composed of devotionals that are centered on those types of clutter. And then each devotional has a prayer and an action step called "Now Unclutter It," and then a page for reflection. So it's got biblical wisdom, but also practical steps to try to find and eliminate the clutter in your life.
For sure. So, how does modern clutter influence our values and priorities?
How does clutter influence our values and priorities?
Yes.
Well, I think most of the time our clutter distracts us from it. Um, we spend so much time when we have clutter in our homes or in our schedules or in our minds. We spend so much time trying to work around the clutter. So when we think about physical clutter, um, especially in this day and age in countries that are wealthy enough to where we have most of us have everything we need and a whole lot more. We have just filled our homes to overflowing. Storage units are very, very prevalent. And we waste a lot of time and money um, looking for things we already have, buying things we already have, but we can't find them. Um, it makes us stressed out. It leads to depression and feeling of overwhelm, and can cause tension in relationships, especially if you're living with someone who doesn't see their doesn't see things the same way as you. Maybe one person is willing to let go of things and the other isn't. Um, so it can cause tension in the home, uh, and again lead to stress and anxiety and excess weight, and it just really does a number on us, affects us mentally and physically. as well.
Very well said, Miss Angie. Very well said. So, how can we identify clutter norms that may not align with what truly matters
Well, so it depends on if we're talking about which of the types of clutter we're talking about.
in general? Let's say
Okay,
from
well,
home or in everything.
well, I'll first. It's easier if I talk about each specific type to be able to identify it. It's harder to speak more broadly.
Oh,
If we're
okay. Let's
talking
say about the
about
book.
Yeah. If we're talking about physical clutter of stuff, one of the easiest ways to identify whether an item is something of value that you need to keep or whether it's clutter is you can either ask two questions, two simple questions, if you're looking at an item and trying to decide. The two questions are: do I love this and do I use it? And if you can't answer yes, absolutely, with no doubts to both of those questions, then it you need to consider that it might be just clutter. If you want to just boil it down to one question to make it easier, just ask yourself about this object. Does this add value to my life? If it doesn't add value to your life, then it is definitely clutter. And you can actually ask that same question to things on your calendar. Does this event, does this task add value to my life? And also, does it align with what I say is most important? And it takes really being willing to be honest and to really look at ourselves in a very serious way. To and it's not easy work. Uh, Being willing to look at our lives and try to identify and get rid of that clutter. But when we do, we are so much more freed. We are so less distracted, and we really can spend time on the things that we want to and that matter most.
Certainly, Miss Angie, totally agree with you. So, what are your struggles in writing uncluttered?
Struggles in writing this. So I had been writing um, newspaper articles for 8 years. I had a monthly column in two local papers. I had self published my first book in 2020. So I was used to writing, but I had never really been coached in writing or had very much help with editing. So when I first started working with Leanna, she had already published three books. She has a series of three fiction books about a professional organizer that are really, really fun. I had read hers and enjoyed hers. So when we started working together, she had been coached for years in her writing and was very used to uh, receiving critique and uh, getting suggestions for how to improve the quality of her writing. But I had never really had that. So when we started working together, um, we would write devotionals that we wanted to have in the book, and then kind of give each other some input on what we thought of it. And Leanna was really helpful in terms of sharing how I could make my writing stronger. And I grew a lot, but I'll tell you that it was really hard to take at first because I was not used to someone criticizing my work. There were a lot of, I guess I had gotten into some bad habits because there were some things I didn't really know or hadn't noticed. And it was very difficult at first. There were some tears, and she said it with all just lots of humility and love. But I just, it was very, very difficult for me. Um, but I am so glad that she did share because I have grown through the process of writing this book. My writing has improved. And then as I continue to write, and sometimes I look back on my old writing and think, boy, I am glad Leanna helped me get better. Um, so that was one of the most difficult things. Um, Another thing was that originally we were going to publish this book in uh, the fall of 2023. And then we got behind. Leanna had her trilogy of fiction that she needed to finish. And so we said, we're going to need to postpone the publishing. And we thought, well, our publisher, Scrivenings Press, we could maybe just delay by a few months if we could publish at the beginning of 2024. The beginning of the year is when everyone is thinking about getting organized. So that'll be perfect, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, but Scrivenings Press had a very full publishing schedule. And they said, if we can't publish in the fall of this year, it will be next year in June, which was almost a full year delay. And that was just, we were very excited about it. I had finished my writing early, so that was difficult to wait. Um, but it kind of needed to happen. So it was fine. But those are probably the two things that were the most difficult about publishing this particular book.
Well, congratulations, Miss Angie. You did it. You did it. So let's talk about shaping your heart of what matters most. How can emotional and mental clutter hold us back in life?
Oh wow, the mental clutter of all of all the three categories, the physical and the schedule and the mental or attention clutter is the most difficult by far. I had been working in client homes for 7 years, um, and I kind of had gotten to the point where I would come home and say, "Oh well, look at my home; it doesn't have any clutter at all." Uh, but I didn't. I was really proud of the fact that I had no physical clutter, but then, as I explored more about it and learned, it's a lot deeper than just the stuff. So the invisible clutter, especially the clutter in your mind, is really it's the most challenging kind. And for me, the part of it that was the most difficult was addiction to my phone. And this is extremely, extremely common. It's an epidemic for sure. Um, you know, there's so much that we can do with our phone, and most of it is very valuable. But it's so easy to just get carried away. And so I'm just going to check my email, and 30 minutes later, been mindlessly scrolling Instagram and Facebook and whatever. Um, and honestly, it took there were years of my husband and my kids and my extended family um, complaining about how much I was on my phone, uh, and just so much damage in relationships just from a silly phone. I wish I could take back those years.
There's no
Uh,
cell phone.
Yeah, but it's so widespread, and but I had to be really serious about some of the ways that I could get rid of that addiction, and definitely was worth all the hard work. It's still something I have to continue to watch. It's easy to get pulled in. Everything about the way the phone is designed and all the apps, they're meant to draw you in and keep you in as long as possible. And so you have to really be willing to fight that.
Totally agree, Miss
Yeah.
Angie.
Yeah.
So, what role does gratitude play in simplifying our hearts and minds?
Mm. What role does gratitude play? I think that's really a good question. Um, when I think about where it comes from, and if I just had to name one thing, I think it would be that we are all trying to find something that will give us this sense of contentment, this happiness. We crave that. And so we buy things and we watch things and we listen to things and we do things all trying to fill this void that we think all these things are going to work to fill. And it's really not. Never was designed that way. And as a Christian, I believe that the only thing that really can fill that is my relationship with God. So if I'm looking at what I already do have, my relationship with God and my friends and my family and gratitude for that richness of life that he's given me, then I'm not going to be trying to fill it with other things that are never going to satisfy me anyway. If we look at
So,
what we have and the blessings of what we have, we're less inclined to try to find that satisfaction by bringing in other things that are really not going to work anyway.
yes, people, stop complaining. Count your blessings.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
that's the number one part. Count your blessings before
Mhm.
you complain. So, Miss Angie, what would be your advice for those people out there want to unclutter the baggage in their life?
Mm. Um, I would say just be willing to take a very hard look at everything. Ask yourself, is this adding value to my life? Um, Leanna and I had a podcast for a couple of years, the beginning of January 2023 till the end of December 2024. Every episode, and it was the same title, Uncluttered, Shaping Your Heart and Home for What Matters Most, covered some of the same topics. And every episode, we ended with this phrase: an uncluttered life is an abundant life. That seems very counterintuitive because we think of abundance as like more, 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 more. But really, it's a life that where we have gotten rid of the things we don't need that gives us that true abundance that we read about in scripture. So, uh, you know, I would just say the number one thing that I would think about is just think about everything that's on your schedule. When you look at the belongings in your home, the way you're spending your time, is that bringing you closer to your goals and your priorities? Is that really going to lead you to a more abundant life? Is it adding value? And if it's not, have the courage to let it go. So many people are almost held hostage by their clutter, especially when it comes to physical stuff. They can't. There's so much emotion behind how we view our belongings and our attachment to our belongings. And if we can let those things go that aren't adding value, even though it's difficult, the letting go, there's so much freedom in it. So much freedom.
Thank you for your advice, Miss Angie.
Mhm.
Let it go, people. Let it go and live at the moment. So, what would be your short term and long term goals as a writer, as an author, or as a podcaster?
Yeah. So, short-term goals as a writer, I just finished writing a play featuring a professional organizer who is helping her very reluctant mother declutter and downsize. And I've submitted that to a local community theater. I've been acting in community theater for over 20 years. I'm hoping to get that on the stage locally and then to get that published, and then see where it goes from there. And then my husband and I are finishing up uh, 6, 7 years of adventures in all the national parks. We will finish those in the next few months, and then we're writing a book of devotionals about that, which is super exciting. Um,
Exciting.
those are that's what's next as far as writing, but I'm always open to. I love getting new ideas, and so I don't know what's going to come after that. I'm not working. organizing in people's homes or businesses, but I do continue to work. I do volunteer organizing for local nonprofits if they are doing good work, and so that kind of keeps me busy um, in those kind of situations. It's wonderful because helping them get rid of their clutter, bring their things in order, helps them do the good works that they're doing much more efficiently. And so I love that. I will continue that as long as I can.
Certainly. Good luck to your goals, Miss Angie, and looking
Thank
forward for
you.
more and more episodes of your podcast and more empowering books to come. So let's talk about living with purpose and intentionality. How does living an uncluttered life help us focus on our true priorities?
Oh, it's just a direct parallel that the more you've gotten rid of all the things that don't matter, the more you're able to focus on the things that do. Um, One of my favorite writers in the field that talks about minimalism, Joshua Becker, he defines minimalism as the intentional promotion of the things that are most important. And so people always talk about uh, minimalism as, "Well, what do I have to get rid of?" And truly, we do need to unclutter, but the whole purpose is so that I can prioritize the things that are the most important. And I really believe that it's impossible to live an abundant, meaningful life when we have a lot of unnecessary stuff, unnecessary things on our calendar, and things in our mind. Um, One of the
Certainly.
things that is most pretty prevalent, another besides the addiction to phones and tablets, another source of clutter in our minds is related to how well organized we are or not. Um, there's so many things that we try to just remember in our minds, things that we have to do, things like, well, I need to stop at the store, or I need to email this person, call this person. But we don't have good systems for getting that out of our heads so that we don't have to just keep thinking and thinking and thinking of those things. And our brains were really made to have ideas and be creative. But as long as we're trying to remember everything, we can't really do that. So, um, in the books and podcasts, I talk about that. So I'm like having a way to get those things out of our head into, whether it's a to-do list or an app or reminders on our phone or um, a paper list, or using the technology like Alexa or Siri, or something just to get all that out of our heads so that
Yes.
we can really, when we're with someone, we can be really with them instead of trying to remember all that. um, it's so I will find myself sometimes, I can be in a room with some people talking, and then I realize, like, I am there in my body, but my brain is somewhere else entirely. It's so easy to get caught up in that. So,
Certainly.
again, anything that you can do to offload things from your brain or from your calendar or your home, the more you're able to be with wherever you are. I love this quote that I can't remember where I first saw this, but the greatest gift you can give someone is your complete attention. How rare is that, though? When
Sure.
you're with someone and you realize, they're actually, you can tell in their eyes they're really not paying attention. Or you go out to eat and you realize that, half the people are on their phones instead of really talking to each other. To live in such a way that I am not distracted, I can really be present wherever I am, and I can give that complete attention to someone is such a gift. It's the greatest gift you can give.
Certainly, people, let it go, and for sure, your life will be better. let it go, and live at the moment. So before we wrap up our discussion, Miss Angie, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, in its
Mm,
first season, because Mental Health 101 is created, of course, to empower mental health awareness.
mm,
So how does an uncluttered heart and home ultimately lead to a more fulfilling and joyful life?
mm. When we have let go of the things that don't matter, we're clear on what our priorities are, who and what is most important. We don't have to, there's so much less stress because we know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. We can focus on um, what 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 we have put first. We know why we're here. We know our purpose, and we can direct everything in our lives towards those purposes. Um, that's the most fulfilled and abundant life that you could ever imagine.
Certainly. Miss Angie Hyche, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world as well as your podcast. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast as well as your books?
Yeah, so my podcast actually ended at the end of December 2024. So we're not producing more episodes, but our 2 years worth of episodes are still out there on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the major platforms. Um, and my website, angiehyche.com. You can find information about my books, my 8 years worth of articles, tons of free resources on decluttering and organizing. I do a lot of speaking. I sometimes travel to speak. Um, Lots of different topics surrounding order, decluttering, time management, and productivity. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So look for anyone to reach out.
Yes, people, I support Miss Angie Hyche because if you support her, more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Angie, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.